All right, guys. So Loretta Lynn's is one of my favorite events. Despite all the craziness and the, parents having to pay a fortune, I still love this event, Coach, and it's got a lot of tradition in it. What did you see this year? What caught your eye at Loretta Lynn's?
Hey, buddy, it's great to be back. Thank you so much. Yeah, another year of Loretta's is in the books. Um, if you follow me on social media, you've seen that I've dropped a couple comments about I love national championships that are 5 days long, mainly because you get to see how resilient both the parents and the riders can be. You and I've talked about it. We've even said it on your show a couple times. I think I know we're at Loretta Lynn's, and instead of singing Coal Miner's Daughter, I think we should sing Billy Joel's Sadness or Euphoria. Because by the time you get to Thursday, right, it's either the week's going great and everybody's ecstatic, euphoria, or it's all gone to heck in a handbasket and the drinking's at an all-time high level, like I said in the preview show. And parents are wondering why we're even in the sport. So, look at, and I don't want to get too far over the front of our skis, but look at the pro sport class, right? You had a guy going in 1-2 and ends up getting ninth in the third moto. That's how quickly you're out of the top three at Loretta's.
Yeah,
That's what
you're
I love about
talking about
Loretta's.
Landon Gordon, right?
Yeah, but I just love Loretta's three moto format spread out over 5 days. You've got to manage heat. You've got to manage energy. You've got to manage. We'll talk a little bit about why the cool zone was not a very, from a physiological standpoint, was actually counterproductive. It was actually zapping the athletes of their energy. But that's from a physiological standpoint. I think it's great that they're trying to find ways to cool the athletes off, but you don't want to go and do that right before you get on the gate. We can talk about that a little bit if you want to, but yeah, I love looking at how an athlete can manage disappointment. There were some political things that happened where there were some protests and some politics involved. Imagine that. People getting bumped back and around and everything else. But hey, as frustrating as it is for the parents, it's amazing to listen to them. They're like, look, we understand it's political. We understand it's disappointing, but we got to move on. And I'm like, dude, that's a set of parents and a young rider that's like, okay, we're going to go the distance because we're all going to have to deal with disappointment. So I love Loretta's. It's the best representation of whether you can handle sadness or euphoria, whether it's self-induced or not.
Yeah, and it's tough. And I used to, it used to be probably 15 years ago, if you didn't have a good showing in the 250A and the Open Pro, you had no shot at having a career. Nowadays, it's not as important. We have futures. We have Combine. By the way, Combine's the stupidest name ever for a feeder series in our sport. They try to copy football or something.
Yeah,
But
that's Tim Cotter's idea, tying it in with college football. He always wanted to be an announcer for WVU. So he does a lot to try to still keep his pulse tying moto into football. Just so you know.
Oh yeah, I kind of figured that, but I think it's the
Okay.
dumbest name ever. But it matters, and it gives the factories and these guys like Mitch and Star a few different looks at the riders. They're not counting on 1 week because if you're not good at Loretta Lynn's, you didn't have a career 15 years ago. Now there's more options, so it's not as big of a deal. But with that said, let's talk about the 250A and the Open Pro. Enzo Timmerman. I told you before, like I was telling you, I don't know what it is about him, but I can see something special. And I think, is he going to be a Hayden Deegan or Jet Lawrence? Probably not, but he's going to be a damn good pro, and he's got that extra it. Who stuck out to you this year, Coach?
Well, if anybody was watching our preview show, you asked me, and I said I thought Timmerman was going to be a sleeper on everybody because he's not a facility kid. I do think he's on the short list with PC. I was very fortunate. I hosted a private performance camp out in California, and he was actually one of the riders that was invited, and he did show up. He was just coming off of a broken leg. A lot of people are not aware of that. And as you know, Chris, like when you broke both your arms, it's one thing to talk about the bravado of an injury, but that mental turmoil. When I was working with AC and Mitch pulled him up to the 250, I got interviewed and somebody asked me, hey, what do you think? How do you think AC will do? And I was very honest. I said, my only concern with AC is he's never endured an injury. The whole time I worked with him in the Super Mini on the entire 85 class, he looped out while we were training at Waldo one day and he broke his coccyx bone, your sit bone. And if you go and you listen to AC when he was on his way back and just had, setback after setback, he even said he started to become so depressed. And his exact words were, I'd never dealt with this before, so I didn't know how to deal with it. And now he's thrust into it. He's a pro, big salaries, a lot of expectations. He didn't know how to deal with it. I can't imagine how you felt when you broke both your arms. I love that picture that you show when you're laying in bed with your arms up. Yeah, you're smiling, but then 3-4 days later, the depression sits in, the dark days start to settle in. Timmerman has come over that. Now I know there's a lot of athletes that have overcome some injuries for sure, but that's when I said to you when I saw him ride at the private facility camp that we did, I was like, Enzo is going to be somebody, and like you said, he's definitely stepped up when it matters most. And I do think he's getting some help from PC, so that's good. I may be wrong with that. I've never spoke to anyone in his camp, but I do believe he's getting some help, and I do think he'll be on a short list. Reminds me a lot of Drew Adams, doesn't it?
Yeah, and Drew Adams, though, I don't think he's going to be a good pro, by the way. I think he's too big. He needs to take the Benny Bloss or Weston Pike route and just go straight to a 450. I think he's going to lose confidence and lose people's confidence in him if he stays on that 250 much longer. 'Cause he might have some good runs, but consistently, you can't give up 40 pounds and be competitive in that 250 class. You just can't.
But where does he go? See, that's the problem. And I was actually talking to Michaela about this during our run. Um, we were running this morning and we were going through some rolling hills. And the reason why you'll see why I bring it up here in a second, but there was, I mean, Chris, this was in your heyday, right? Remember when, especially for Team Green, the contingency money, the amount of money that these guys could make in a week at Loretta's. Um, there's a particular somebody, I'm not going to bring up his name because he's got a very black cloud around him in our sport, unfortunately. But I remember speaking to him, and he had at that time we didn't have Sprinter vans the way we do now, and he had a extended maxi van, and he had 3 bikes in the back, and he worked at a dealership. He'd drive Friday night, he'd race Saturday, race 3 classes, make $3,000, drive through the night, race Sunday, win $3,000, go to work on Monday. And think about the contingency. Now, by the way, it wasn't a Team Green rider. I don't want anybody trying to figure out who it is. It doesn't matter who it is. It's the contingency money. My point for bringing this up, Chris, is I said to Michaela, I remember when there was a time that it was almost financial suicide to leave becoming an amateur, because if you didn't already have a 2-year 250 deal and an option for third, which we haven't seen in a long time. Remember when those deals were 2 years, 250 guaranteed? Well, let's back the train up. You were guaranteed 2 years as amateur, 2 years 250 with an option for 450. Not everybody got that, but that was usually 250 amateur, 250 pro with an option to go 450. Where would Drew Adams go now? He's not making contingency money as an amateur anymore. Go pro and drive from Daytona Beach to Washington to New York to Texas to California back to Tennessee, crisscrossing the country as a pro. Where does Drew Adams go? I do agree with you. He's a big boy. Marchbanks, your friend, you're right, your buddy. Hopefully he does get a ride, but I don't know if you can shed any light. Does he have any options on the 450?
I haven't even asked him yet. Honestly,
Okay.
he's so tired of me talking about it. He's like, no, I know what you think, but I don't want to. He's doing what he's doing. I just
Yeah.
basically cheerlead him these days.
Well, and that's a problem with like Drew Adams, to your point exactly. And um, I don't want to get off of the amateur conversation. Like I'm really curious who's going to make up PC this year. I don't see Ty Masterpool coming back. McAdoo got an extension. Seth got a 2-year extension.
I heard Kai DeWolf's in the picture.
Ooh, that would be a good one. But
Yeah, I don't know. That's why I look at Timmerman. I'm like, well, where does he go if he goes pro? Because I don't know that PC Star could always add another bike, which would be cool. But I don't know. I heard
Yeah.
Star has Landon Gordon, which I'm not a huge fan of that.
Well, unfortunately, anytime Daniel Blair brings one of these athletes to the forefront, it seems like that's the poaching site that always goes. And I can say that with a smile because Daniel jokes about it as well. I don't think that's, it's kind of a frustration for sure, but I don't think it's the end of the world.
The other guy that caught my attention was Cade Johnson. Do you know much about
Mhm.
Cade Johnson?
I do not, unfortunately. I've never had a chance to work with him, especially with him, being a facility kid. It becomes more and more difficult to work with these guys because I've had some facilities where as soon as Chris Cooksey comes to a facility and the facility asks, do you work with anybody? And they mention my name. Literally, the rider is told, you cannot work with Robb Beams. It's amazing how territorial a lot of these facilities are. They're like, you're doing it our way or you can't ride here. That's a story for another day, but I could give you literally a dozen facilities that's happened to me in the last couple of years. I don't get butthurt over it. I just think it's interesting how, I don't know what the word is, Chris, soft.
Yeah,
Like I'm only here to compliment a facility, what they do. I'm not here to compete.
well, Coach, it's crazy to me that I know you and I know all the knowledge you have, and you're not looking to push anyone out. You're just looking to add to the pile of knowledge they do have. It just seems weird to me that they do that. I don't understand it. But back to Kate Johnson. So he
Yeah.
grew up in Utah and was buddies with one of my little friends, and they rode little 50s together. And then he got picked up by that Yamaha program. If you'll remember, he was the guy that debuted that Yamaha 65. Remember when they dropped it? They picked him up the year before they dropped it. He was going to, and he's been with Yamaha ever since. My question is, I worry about him because he looks really tall and his dad's a big dude. Is he going to have the Drew Adams, Garrett Marchbank symptoms? He's good, but I don't know if I see it. I hope he does good because from what I know, the dad and they've worked so hard for this for so long. I'd hate to see it being cut short because he's too tall or something. But I don't know. What do you think of Cade? What did you think of his performance this weekend?
Well, it was another name that we saw up on the board quite a bit coming through the pack. Another guy that, a lot of adversity getting there, like most everybody has. Yeah, I would have to put him on the top of the rung. If you're looking at the 5 takeaways, you'd be remiss if you didn't put him up in there. And the cool part will be, and I don't know if you maybe have a list, how many guys do you know? And we'll talk about Cade right now. Is he going to go do the last 2 outdoor nationals?
He is. He is
Okay.
going to do that. I think most of the guys, now that they're not committed, they can do those nationals and not worry about it. Like they're already, like some of the guys already did them. And I'm pretty sure Cade Johnson is going to do that now and do exercise that amateur clause, which I love that clause. I love
I do
that
too.
test the waters and not become a full-time pro.
No, I totally agree. And if for those of you who follow me on my podcast network, I had Tony Alessi on, and Tony was the like the smartest man I've ever seen. He said that he would literally make contracts with the track to leave the national track as it is. So back then we raced on Sundays. He would literally rent the track on Monday. He would take lap times and see how close Mike could get on an 85 at that time, an 80, the Honda, right? He'd see how close he could get to the pros, and he would take the lap times one day later, splash a little bit of water down, don't groom the track at all. And to your point exactly, it's like, I don't think there's any better grooming ground. You just were at the national championship. Let's say you were top 5. Well, let's see, do you really stack up capable of going out and punching your card into an outdoor national? That's something that I'd like to talk to you about. We don't have to do it today unless you have time, but it is interesting to me when you look outside, let's say the 25 at the outdoor nationals, you're not seeing the guys that were top 8 to 15 at Loretta's. Have you noticed that? It was a lot of the guys that were, let's call it mid-pack B. A lot of those guys are making the weekend show, which I think is cool. But I do have some questions in regards to what happened. This is exactly what you're talking about with the Cadence of the world, or we can get into Claimgate, and he disappeared and everything else. When you look at all these different riders that were legitimately top 10, a few of them are kind of trickling in there. It's always amazing when you go to Loretta's and that person's the man of the week. And then you look at a year later and he's 28th or 29th and nobody's talking about him. Like I think about Gavin Towers when he was riding for Star Yamaha, right? And now we just kind of see his name filtering in down there, but we don't see the excitement anymore. It's amazing how fast, but
this is the same thing I've been preaching forever. You can make money in this sport if you're on a factory team, but if you can't get to that level or you haven't developed fast enough to get on that factory team early, your path to making a career in motocross, now you've got to fund your own like your own project and go race and hope that you do good enough. Even if you get top 10s, top 5s, you still have to get onto a factory team or you're out of pocket. Weston Pike told me he didn't make money until like his second year getting help. Like
wow.
It's that long before you can actually turn a profit. If these promoters and their $100 million streaming deal could chip in and not be the lowest sport in the history of sports to participate and put money back into their athletes, we would have a different path. You could buy your own stuff, go racing, make enough money to at least cover the journey. So you're not 3 years out of pocket chasing the nationals. I mean, you could spend hundreds of thousands of dollars and have nothing to show for it.
No, I totally agree. I feel like whenever somebody listens to you talk about it, it feels like you're beating the same drum. But what's the alternative? If you don't beat the drum, it's exactly what the message wants to be, right? If I can just act like it doesn't exist, and anytime somebody talks about it, let's say goes against the system a little bit, it's easier for me just to say that you're vindictive, you're visceral, you're jaded, you're ostracized, so therefore you're just going to try to take down the people who are trying to make the sport good. I always just pull my hair out whenever I see those comments because I'm like, you're missing the point. You're absolutely missing the point. And I don't know if maybe the listeners have to have themselves or somebody that they know and care about that's putting their blood, sweat, and tears in and just realizing what a losing proposition it is. maybe you would be a little bit more, I hate to use the word sensitive, but a little bit more aware of the idea that it's a 99.99% failure rate. And that's sad. And I think, whether you want to say it should be the governing body or it should be the promoters, I'm sure Major League Baseball, and I don't take this out of context, I'm sure Major League Baseball cares about what's going on at the farm league, because they know without the farm league, there's no stream of players coming into majors. Yeah, I know there's going to be the exception where they're poaching kids out of high school. We're seeing more and more of that. But for the most part, if there's not a feeder system, eventually the main show starts to decline. And this is where we get into the conversations about just having a factory class, and then having a separate race, which is non-factory bikes. I mean, there's all kinds of ways, but I understand everybody's resistant to change. Change costs money. Change always creates resistance, but something's got to change. I mean, when you look at, and you've got that graph that you've put up several times, when you look at how much the NFL and hockey and baseball and all these different sports have reinvested in, and as you've said, they all have grown as an industry. So every team owner is worth more money because of the way it was restructured. I don't see that as being a bad, as you keep doing, beating the drum. I don't see that being a bad, hey, we need a catalyst for change. If we use previous examples, what is it that you always say? The first one that walks through the door, ends up getting burnt the worst or something like that. And it's the same idea. It's the same idea here. We don't need to reinvent the wheel, just duplicate a successful model.
Every successful sport does it, coach. And I'm not, and then they go, well, those sports make so much more money. I said, yes, no, you're missing the point. I'm talking percentage. When it's profit sharing, you're not giving the gigantic dollars if they're not there. If they're there, you're just sharing the profit. And everybody, and that's the thing, is these promoters think I'm trying to take money. I'm not.
No.
I actually want them to get bigger. They deserve it. And they do a great job. The way Loretta Lynn's was presented on TV, it looks good. I mean, they do a hell of a job, and I'm sure they're working their asses off.
Yeah. Well, you bring up something that's really important, and that is because I want to stay on the focus of amateurs. I want our listeners to stay tuned to what we're talking about. The question that I have is, you've got Jace from Gypsy Tales who lives in Dubai. When you look at these Formula One venues out in the middle of the desert, they're building Formula One, and I don't know what the number is. Somebody told me, I think it's like 580 million or some astronomical amount of money. Why would these investors invest in a venue unless there was going to be an ROI for them to bring these race teams in and all of the pomp and the circumstance that goes into it? Stop and think about that. I know that the tracks pay a shitload of money to have the national. They got to pay the pro purse, and they got to guarantee $100,000 and all the things that you've been helpful in, actually the catalyst for all of us to understand, right?
Yeah.
Well, the tracks are putting out $100,000. I understand that. I know they're putting out the price purse and stuff, but what is it that Formula One is doing that causes people to build a race venue in the middle of the desert and then wrap it up with all kinds of entertainment? I just don't know why we're not emulating something like that. Because there's no way, and you and I've talked about this, I've started following Formula One because of Netflix, right? I've started to understand who Tyler Hamilton is or isn't. And the idea that he left is going to Ferrari and he left Mercedes-Benz. And I couldn't tell you any of that without Netflix.
Well, coach, and the thing is teams right now, there's no incentive to do that. There's no incentive for these teams to open up their pits for Netflix or anyone else.
But would they be allowed to? Would they even be allowed to?
Yeah, would they even be allowed to? But when you have profit sharing, they're open to it. They want to grow it because their budget will get bigger. They'll have more money to go racing, and everybody's winning. And I don't understand why that is just so overlooked. And they go with this archaic, the sport is a niche sport. No, it's not. It's not. It's only a niche sport because they're strangling it. So, but
I always say, I don't own a Formula One race car, but I'm into it. So you can't really tell me the idea it's a niche sport, because Formula One is a niche sport. It's a very lucrative and a very expensive sport. You know what I mean? I don't know. We could talk about this for days on end, because you look at what Formula One's done, look at the sponsors they've garnered the attention of. Why did they do that? Because they know they can get an ROI. If you just look at business 101 from sponsorship standpoint, why does a venue in Dubai, Abu Dhabi, wherever that venue is at, why does it have Rolex? Why does it have Shell Oil? Why does it have these huge multi-billion-dollar companies? Because they can leverage it for entertainment and everything else. But man, I watched that Netflix and I go, you don't think it'd be cool to see the behind the scenes of, I think back to the RCH days, They couldn't commit to Ken Roxon until Kenny Watson was able to go and get Jimmy Johns. And they had to tell Jimmy Johns, well, if we get your support and we get the casino and we get Dodge, then I can go out and get Kenny. So what comes
Oh,
first? So what did Ricky and Kerry have to do? They had to front the money up front to guarantee it, right? And it's just like that is a perfect example. They were able to get the best, and look at the sponsors that team had. We
yeah.
don't need to
And
go into why it fell apart, but that's well documented.
when I think it's hilarious that they always fall back on. They want to do what's best for the sport and grow the sport. Anytime anyone says a message that they don't want, but I'll tell you what would grow the sport. Those
Mm-hmm.
girls at Loretta Lynn's are so fast, coach. They are fast like boys. That racing Kyler, Mela Herrick, um, was
Delachua Turner is the one that got my attention. Um,
oh Lala Turner.
Lala Turner, she got my attention. I've got an athlete that she actually raced against, and he's no slouch whatsoever. And I think he actually got beat by her in one of the motos. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing you should put your tail in between your legs about. She's just a badass on a motorcycle. So yeah, it was cool to see a lot of that. I did see some of the comments saying that like when racing gets a little bit older, or the ages level out a little bit, there'll be a little bit of an imbalance. I'm sure, but let's face it, we have Vicky Golden who made the Supercross. You've got these up and coming girls. You look at JP Money, you look at Ashley Filick. Um, I was fortunate enough to work with Ashley Filick, and you put some of those lap times that she was putting together. I'm not saying that she would be battling with, the top five, but I don't think she'd be getting lapped. Well, I shouldn't say that. She'd get lapped, but she wouldn't, be struggling to be in 40th place. I don't believe.
Coach, I see. Now, this is something a lot of people think I'm out to lunch on this, but I truly believe women have strong legs, strong hips, incredible cardio, and this is a motorcycle. This isn't like you have to run and sprint or tackle somebody. I don't think you need that much strength if you have the proper technique to ride a motorcycle, but you need legs, hips, and cardio. I think if there were enough women that raced and we had a national series that they could shoot for and we had a lot more girls going for it, I think you'd see girls running inside the top 10. Are they going to win? Probably not, but they're going to be a heck of a lot closer than they would in a lot of other sports.
Yeah, I have to politely disagree with you on that one, only because of all the athletes that we've worked with, like on the endurance side. No matter how good they are, I can't get a female's wattage up on the bicycle to match a professional cyclist or a professional triathlete. And I look at something like UFC. I just can't imagine that there's a bad enough female that could go in and get into the top 10 or top 15. Just some, and what I mean by that, Chris, is maybe I
But coach, they don't have motorcycles to even the playing field. You don't get a weight advantage in UFC.
right.
So there's some
And
things
this
that I
is
look at that could be a little different. It's not going to be the same, but it's closer than a lot of other sports.
the only reason why I use UFC is because I think the girls, this is going to sound very petty, if you could guarantee that the girls would not get smashed by the guys in a corner, that's where I think the intimidation that's why I use the UFC as an example. This chick's a badass, but if you were to walk up to her and push her, you could probably move her a little bit quicker. That doesn't mean she's not going to come back swinging. But that's where I do agree with you. If you just had open track, and you were using lap times, I think they could be competitive. But if you're coming in, who's going to be able to hold it on longer? Who's going to push the other one over the berm? Now, again, there's some girls out there that have put some guys on the ground. I get it. But I'm saying at a pro level, I think, unfortunately, I mean, we've seen it when you see these young 125 riders racing against somebody 5 years older, whether it's the aggression, the know-how on being able to elbow somebody off the track. That's the only reason why I don't think the women would be able to stand a chance with them long term. So,
Yeah.
but I do like your idea of you've got the Sophia Phelps and you've got these bad to the bone pro girls. Let's bring back the JP Moneys and the Ashley Filicks, and let's bring that back. And let's not make it kind of I hate to use the word circus because it's so close to our sport, but incorporate it where it's not they're doing one of their 3 or 4 pro rounds at an amateur national. To me, that's kind of like you're dipping your feet in both buckets. Either you
Well,
put them and give them a chance to race both motos at the nationals with the men. I know there's a TV schedule and all of that, but I just think it's a little bit disservice to say, well, we have a pro women's series, but 3 of the 4 races are held at amateur nationals. That doesn't make sense to me.
coach, the UFC has women headline pay-per-views. They headline
Mm-hmm.
pay-per-views and they
Yeah.
get almost as many buys. Why can't, if we can get enough high level women like Lala and all these girls, and I see the generation coming, Why can't you give the 250 guys a week off and have Redbud be 450 in women? Or, the other one. And I think I honestly believe, yes, you're going to see a slight dip in the beginning because you're going to take a second. But once people learn these women's stories, they're not going to care. It's just one more group of pros that we get to focus on and generate and grow the sport. And we can get our guys the rest. Right now, we're killing our guys with 31 races. So if we
I,
just mixed in a
excuse me.
few to kind of give these guys a break, it could change everything, coach.
I totally agree with one caveat. Remember how we were just talking about Netflix? If Netflix came in and brought the personalities of Sophia Phelps and Turner and Racing and all of these young girls, right? I'm fortunate enough I get to work with Kenzie. I get to work with Reagan and Riley Davis. I've got some young girls, and here's the key. If we had a Netflix show that allowed those personalities to come to life, and here's the hard caveat, and then they go full send mode on the track. And we'll use somebody who's very high profile in our sport, Hayden Deegan's sister. I don't know if she likes Danica Patrick. Again, I'm not a race car fan. So if I talk out of the left side of my mouth, I apologize here. But if you look at Deegan's sister, I hope this doesn't come across. She's attractive. She's a good speaker. She has the Deegan name behind her, and people want to go see her race. And then she gets in there and she's able, to your point exactly, right? We're just staying on the mechanical. She knows how to drive a damn car. There's no two ways about it. So Hailie, growing up underneath Brian, has learned how to be charismatic, be in front of the camera. And people may say I'm sexist, and I apologize. But have you ever seen that lady not look good in front of a camera? She understands the importance of it. And that's not being sexist, but you've got to be able to. She presents herself well in front of the camera. She articulates herself. Then she goes and races her ass off. She is creating that demand. Yes, Brian's done a good job of teaching her how to drive at a young age, giving her the opportunities. He's talked about this on several podcasts. We need personalities, and that's what you just said, and I agree with you 100%. If we were at Loretta Lynn's and we were starting to collect data, can you imagine the interviews that we got from racing and we got from all those girls? And then in 5 years from now, Netflix is able to use it where they showed her at such a young age, winning the 65 class, making history. It's the same way when you watch these Netflix and they're showing you the guy that they brought into, I apologize, guys. I think it was the Mercedes team, and he's racing against Van.
I'm not sure. I don't watch that show. I probably should.
Well, the reason why I say that is they were showing him in the kart racing. They were showing him in little karts because that's where Formula One comes from, right? They go through kart racing, and then they've got Van Stappen, I think is his name. And if I'm chopping it up, guys, please don't crucify me. But the idea here is they were showing footage of them jamming around on a track, doing interviews. And it's like, it reminds me when we saw interviews with young Ken Roxon, right?
Yeah.
He's over there winning the worlds, and he's coming to America, and he's got the earrings, and he's got the German accent. We're still using those interviews to this day. We won't have anything from these girls. We don't know anything about the girls. And so therefore, if we don't start getting something into the hopper now, when it is, now this is why I'm saying they've got to be able to articulate themselves, present well in front of a camera, and then go freaking send it on Larocco's Leap.
Coach,
that's when dudes will be like, holy shit.
What you're saying is exactly what I saw. Now, you couldn't sell women 20, 25 years ago. The level was so low, it was like watching sea riders. These girls are not sea riders. And that's what I'm saying. They're close enough that we're talking about competition with each other. UFC said they'd never bring women in because when Dana White would see a women's fight, he had like one girl who was trained and one girl that was like not, and it was just mismatches. But once they got enough women, they realized, okay, well, it's not about just being the toughest person on earth. It's about having a high level and then marketing them. That is something like you couldn't do it next year. You might not even be able to do it within 2 or 3 years, but in 5 years, you could implement that type of a plan. It's something you'd have to start thinking about right now.
Agreed. Yep, agreed. And that's the hard part because, like you said, I read some of the comments people said where if it was 450 in women, ticket sales would go down. And like I said, it might take a little bit of a dip, but the generation of women that we have now and the idea that they're on that trajectory, they're on good equipment, they're not afraid to send it. Yeah. Can you imagine seeing the first female do Larocco's Leap on a 450?
Well,
I mean, that would just be next level.
These idiots that say ticket sales are going to drop, they're probably not, because every guy that has a wife, a daughter that might not go, might go. You're just opening up a new crowd, and maybe it will fail, but I don't think it will. And I think if we look at history and we look at these other sports who've focused on women's, as headlining athletes, tennis, UFC. It's worked. You have to follow
Yeah.
that same formula, but it can work.
Well, this is the part that gets me is you go back to tennis, right? When you have, the good looking blonde and, some people said it was sexist because she was so attractive and she was a sex symbol in the tennis world or whatever. But then the point is she was attractive in front of the TV and then she went and won everything. Well, you put those two together as a mixture and it's pretty hard to argue with, does somebody want to see that person on the podium and listen to them talk? Yes, if they can eloquently speak. But when you're using monosyllables and you just, you're not very, we can get into the whole subject of the PW fights at Loretta's. That's a perfect example of the things that continue to undermine any progress that we're making. Now, again, I think based on what I've heard, sounds like that was more of a inter-family dispute. It wasn't just two people losing their shit in the impound area. But that's why I have to use Hailie Deegan as an example in line with what you were talking about. I think if not to put Brian on a pedestal, the dude's a cool, great guy, badass dude. Just freaking follow his model. He's done it with his own daughter in real time. This isn't some nebulous idea. He's literally doing it. Like AMA should just hire Brian, make him the president and CEO, and just say, let's fix this whole freaking image thing that we've got. He built Middle Militia from nothing, going against Travis Pastrana. So that's why I use Hailie, and I am in line with what you're saying. And if they give enough content and they allow them the right trajectory, but unfortunately, when you're making them race on amateur race weekends, it's not giving them the women's pro platform that they're marketing, unfortunately. And I think that's a little disheartening.
It doesn't give them the platform to grow to be the series. Like at Colorado, it wasn't like the field is very disproportionate, really fast at the top, really slow at the bottom. Once you get to where that 40 rider field is separated about like our 250 and 450 was 15 years ago, then you go with it. But you got to get it a little closer. You got to get 40 women that can run a good pace. And once you do that, you have a marketable series. But hey, coach, we'll move on from that. 250B, there's a guy by the name of Deacon Deno. I didn't know much about him. Damn, he's fast. What did you think of him and any of the other B riders? Anyone else stick out in your mind?
I mean, when you're looking at that B class, Deacon's had a great 85 career moving up. If you go back and you look at the history books, he's not a stranger to the podium whatsoever. It's just that example of what we talked about before. You've got younger and younger riders that are getting these big contract deals. They're getting bikes starting on 65s, and that's running them all the way up to the B class. You'd start stringing together some B class results. Then next thing you know, it's going to be 2 years in the B class, and then maybe 1 year at Pro Circuit or, wherever it may be. No, not a surprise at all there. We'll talk a little bit about it. Like when we get down to the 85 class, I actually worked with Tace Morgan when he was back on 65s, and he's just kind of kept that upward trajectory. And so am I surprised to see these names? No, but B class, it's like we said, but in the previous show, it used to be Pro Sport was where it was at. And obviously there was a lot of heat there, but you look at that B class and you look at the lap times, and we're talking very comparable lap times all the way around.
Yeah, and it's a different track, different times, but Deacon Deno had the fastest lap of the weekend, but it was on a better track. But yeah,
smoother track. Yeah.
And then Vincent Way, I know we didn't have a good weekend, but I just the things I look for in the racers to see who's going to be a good pro is not necessarily the results. I look at how they handle, like you say, how they handle adversity.
Yeah.
Do they change lines? What are they doing to get better? Because doesn't matter if you win the B class or the A class at Loretta's. When you go pro, you have to be able to find another gear and level it up again. Some guys can, some guys can't. And I'm looking for who still has meat on the bone.
I'm going to contradict myself, Chris, a little bit earlier on what we talked about. I think one of the things that drives the emotions at Loretta's when we get into that 250B class, Schoolboy 2, 250B, is if you're sitting on a contract and you've been around the sport a long time, Chris, literally the contract will be as absolute as if it's not top 3 at Loretta's, you lose your ride. Plain and simple. So I think that does contribute. I said earlier that resiliency, and I'm going to backtrack a little bit of that, because if you were given a contract of any color of bike and you just unfortunately spun off the start, got a bad chip pick, shit happens, right? And you don't get that top 3 and you're coming across the end of that third moto and you finish 6, that contract is gone. I think that justifies being a tad bit upset.
Yeah.
And so I'm gonna retract that just a little bit, because a lot of these contracts are starting so early now. Like we were saying earlier, 65s or the 85s. And Um, we could go back to the whole contingency thing, right? It used to be there, the field, what's the word I'm looking for? You could have several races. You're doing really, really well. And then you have one bad race. And it's like you had six good ones to one bad one. It didn't matter if it was at Ponca or if it was at World Minis or if it was at Loretta's. We're like, hey, look, for the year, you've had a stellar year. You had one bad race weekend. Well, now the contingency money's gone away. And there's been enough moving around of the political chips as it is that quite a bit of emphasis does get put on Loretta's. So now you don't do well at Loretta's, it's as if the rest of the year didn't even matter. Like they shouldn't have even raced Daytona, Mammoth. They shouldn't have gone to Ponca, World Minis, AZ Open, Cal Classic, blah, 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 right? And that's the part that becomes a little bit interesting because if you look at, and I'm not going to mention any names, if you look at some of the kids that won last year, it was like, hey, good job. If you do it again this year, you keep buying your bikes, you keep running our colors, then we'll put a contract in front of you. That's interesting. You just won last year. Instead of them saying, hey, great job, let's set you up with 6, 7 bikes, $50,000 parts allowance. It's like, you go ahead and you just string this out for another year on your dime. And we are seeing a lot more of that, unfortunately. It's the same way that the contingency money has gone away. Yeah. I saw that there was an OEM, and I'm not going to mention the color of the OEM, but they had this poster that was at the race. And I couldn't believe this, Chris. They were promoting that 10th place was going to pay $50 at Ponca, Daytona, and some other races. 10th place is worth $50. But
entry fee is $260.
I was going to say the entry fee is over $200. Like we had $100,000 in contingency for our CRS riders. I don't mind publicly saying that, right? So the idea is, I can't believe that us as a coaching company is offering $100,000. And I don't know what first place was $1,500 and you go down. Let's just be optimistic. Let's say it was $5,000 for first through 10th. $1,500 was for first. It went immediately from $1,500 to $750, then down to $300, down to $50. My point is, how are the parents? There's no contingency money. And even though you won a championship at Loretta's, good job. Keep running our colors for the next year and we'll entertain giving you. Well, you know, shit happens in a year. The potential, I'll use Nolan Ford. Dude's absolutely on rails. We won a championship together last year. He's worked his ass off this year. Got a bad gate pick in the first one, came through the field 39th to 4th, 39th to 3rd, I think it was. Phenomenal race. Just not enough. We lost our championship. Did that mean he sucked this year? No, he had a hell of a week, but he didn't defend the number 1 title. So what does it look like? Oh, can't do it. Can't back it up. And you're just like, really? I mean, that, and by the way, I'm not putting words in KTM's mouth. KTM didn't say you didn't back it up. I'm just speaking loosely in regards to the industry. Backing up year-to-year championships is damn near impossible.
Well, but coach, like I looked at Nolan Ford, he went up from the 10-12 to the 14-15. So we went from being the oldest in the group to the youngest in the group, and that can be difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, all these classes are, look at the girls class. You've got a 13-year-old racing against a 16-year-old.
You could be as low as 11 in that women's class against a 16-year-old. That's crazy.
Well, then look at schoolboy, right? You can have a 12-year-old against a 15-year-old. I don't know about you, but I'm not afraid to fight a 12-year-old when I'm 15.
Oh no, I had to do it when I was an 80 rider. I rode against all my brother's friends, and it's different. You're giving up a lot. You're giving up a lot. And I'm not saying that you can have an 85 13-year-old class, a 14-year-old class, a 15-year-old class, but I mean, at some point, it's like you start looking at the schoolboy 1, schoolboy 2, and it's, you know, like the old saying, right? It's men racing against boys in some of those. So it's pretty interesting for sure. And then the 80 classes, Enzo. So you had Tace Morgan. He is good, and he's been good for a while. Mm-hmm. I thought Maddox Timmerman had him covered, but he came through like very resilient. And
yeah,
I don't know what to think of Tace though, because he's had so much support for so long. When I look at Tace, I'm not sure if I see a kid who can continue. Like sometimes you get up on top and it's hard. What do you see with these guys? Well,
particularly with Tace, believe it or not, he's not had support that long. I think he's only had Yamaha for about 3 years. Because I had a dear friend of ours was actually supporting him when he was in upstate New York getting started. And he was, you know, helping him get to the races and stuff like that. He actually paid for me to work with him as a rider on his fitness off the bike. And yeah, I think his situation with Yamaha has only been in the last 2 to 3 years. So I was happy to see him get that support. It was cool to see Yamaha, spreading their wings a little bit, getting some 65 riders, getting some 85 riders. Um, so yeah, I think Tace is coming into his own. I do believe that he trains at Sandbox, so he's another facility kid that's put in a lot of work. You got to think about it. In all fairness, as much as I like the Yamaha bike, that's the only bike that I ever bought for me and my boys. To be honest with you, is it's just definitely underpowered, and the fact that Tace was out there and able to make that YZ competitive. Whatever engine work he may have, done in the mod class or whatever. But, I just think it's cool. He's got the Blue Crew bike up front, and Taste, the whole family is a really, really cool dude all the way. Excuse me, a great family all the way around. And yeah, I was happy to see Taste putting it together this week for sure.
Yeah, I've never heard anything negative about him, and I've been a fan of the kid for a while, but I just wasn't sure. Like I said, I look for different things. I don't look for results. I look for what kind of improvements and where I see guys. And with him, I'm not sure. I'm sure he'll be I look at Taste and I see a guy who will absolutely be in this sport for a long time. And if he decides to go pro, he'll be a heck of a pro. It becomes to, is he a Jet Lawrence or is he just a good guy?
Mm-hmm.
I think I can almost settle he's going to be at least a good guy.
Yeah,
Tell me,
absolutely.
tell me about your guys. How'd everything go? I'm going to get James on this week. I know it didn't go the way he wanted, but I think he had a good
No,
time.
he has no reason to hang his head low. Everybody's got to get those bad gate picks, and he got them in both motos. So no complaints there. Selfishly for me, in the CRS gear and the CRS graphics kit, they had the cameraman that was out there in the left 40. So we got a lot of TV time. And then ironically, they switched the camera angle and he got a bad gate pick. So he got like two on the inside. So we got some good coverage there as well. So no, I'm very proud of James. You got to remember, this is a full-time pilot. He's on call, literally he's on call for, I think 2 days, and then he's off for 3, or he's got a really crazy. And when I say on call, like we said in the previous show, I mean, it's crazy. Like he can think that he's going to be in a location for a day or two. They can be done with their power meeting and he's back in the air 4 hours later, no sleep, no exercise, So the fact that he gets to the show, I couldn't be more proud to have him be a part of us be a part of his program, and to have our colors on him. It was great. We ended up with 2 national championships, and then Aiden Steinbrecher, he tied for points in the third moto, so he ended up getting third instead of the second that I know he deserved. The other class, he got bumped around, and I think we ended up fourth in that class, or even fifth. So those guys, those heavy hitters, those guys killed it. Both of my 65 riders, unfortunately, ended up leaving the farm, leaving the ranch injured.
What happened?
Jack Deffendahl, if you watch his Instagram, it was kind of one of those, he goes up the face of the jump and it looked like like he ran over a grenade. He didn't do anything wrong. It was just going up, and then the bike just goes away from him and he lands in the infield, and looks like we have a torn meniscus, unfortunately. Then we have Caden Sedgwick. He was killing it as well. And unfortunately ended up damaging his hand pretty good. So he ended up going to get X-rays and spending some time there. So like I said, the Davis girls did great. I know that they wanted better, but unfortunately we had a mechanical that took us out. That's just part of racing. I think you could, no matter how much you try to prepare, something can always go wrong. Kenzie did really well. She got caught up in a first turn crash. If you look at her Instagram, she's literally just freaking picking bikes up and just chucking them like Arnold Schwarzenegger throwing bikes. Just really, really proud of everybody that went there. Our number one national plates up to 419. So going in, we had 417. We picked up 2. So it puts us at 419 AMA number 1 plates, and we have 4 AMA number 1 pro plates as well. So that's continuing to grow. Guys like Talon Staggs and Chase DeShiel, he got a top 10 in both classes. He's one of our factory riders. Very proud of him. If you follow me on social media, he busted a whole shot in his first moto. So in fact, Chris, I appreciate you putting that photo of him.
I was going to say, I used that one.
Yeah, that was awesome. I really appreciate it. He killed it, doing great. And, the thing with Chase, like you were talking about earlier, about who's going to go the distance, that's the kind of guy, not because we are fortunate enough to have our colors on him and the ability to work with him. He's one of the most level-headed guys you've ever seen. I even mentioned it to you. I wasn't even sure what class Chase had signed up for because he qualified for all 4. He said, Rob, I just want to see which one's got the deepest field, and that's what I'll sign up for. I said, good for you, man.
Coach.
I
Now
love it.
that you said that to me last time, and I thought about that for a while, and
Hmm.
at first I thought, oh, that's cool. He's going after the best competition. But then I thought, you know what? That might not be the case. Sometimes you want to stack the deck against yourself so that if you don't win, you have an excuse. It's more
Mm.
pressure to go to the class where you're supposed to win. Keep an eye on him for that. I'm not saying that's what happened. I'm saying that's a tendency. Like, I know I would try and do that. It's easier to go to a class where you're not expected to win than go to one where you are expected to win. If you don't win, it's a mistake.
No, it's a great point. And this is one of the things that I love talking with Chase's parents. Our big thing is consistency, number one. As a general rule of thumb, what I look for is 1 second per 5 laps. So obviously at Loretta is a 2 second deviation. I'm perfectly content with. Stuff happens. Track gets dry, gets wet. Um, anything can happen. 1 second per 5 laps is the deviation that we strive for. It's what we do in training, and he executed it beautifully. That's why if you ever see me doing screenshots on social media and saying consistency counts, that's what we mean. We could go down an entire 2 hour conversation about why consistency matters. When you get consistency, I can elevate that and create new speed. You know how you hear Mitch and all the factory guys, we can work with speed, we can work with speed. From a physiological standpoint, there's a science to creating speed. It's not about being haphazard and being, one lap's 206 and one's 159. That never creates speed. People would tend to argue and say, yeah, but he popped a 159. Like I said, we could do 2 hour conversation on it. Just take my word for it. When we're looking at trying to elevate speed. There's a science to creating consistency through speed and then elevating that game. And we've done it literally. This is our 40th year and over 400 championships to prove that the system works. But it's talking moto dads off the cliff where they're like, we got to be faster. And I'm like, no, you need to be more consistent. And if any parents listening, I want you to go look at your lap times from Loretta's and calculate three things very simply. Throw out the fastest, throw out the slowest, and average the other 8 laps. You can actually get rid of the first lap because that's always a shorter lap, but then take the remaining 9, throw out the fastest and slowest, and then average the other 7, and then compare that average to each one of your laps. If you're less than a second, your athlete's on the point. And if you want to reach out to me, I'm happy to explain that. No charge. I'm more than happy to walk you through that. But yeah, Chris, it's Chase is killing it. And I do think you'll see somebody like him because, not to bring up a sour subject, but he got an expensive helicopter ride earlier in the year and he was able to come back from it. And I honestly didn't anticipate it, not because he's not tough enough, but because the injuries were so significant. I'm not going to divulge what it is because I don't have the liberty to do so, but it was not pretty. So to even see him, like I said in the previous show, the fact that he's there, it's like, man, just drop the microphone and walk out of the room. You're done. Just go enjoy the week.
That's it. That's it. You
you
get
know,
there, you get those gate drops, you build.
yeah.
And I look at him and hearing something like that, that tells me there's a lot of meat on the bone. He's got a lot of
Mm-hmm.
room to improve, and there's things that he's doing to get better. And if I were scouting for teams, those are the things that I look for. I don't necessarily, results matter, but they don't matter that much to me.
Well, he's fortunate. He rides for that future MX team, and that's a team that's got their head screwed on straight. They're very big into providing equipment and bikes, and just all the way around a great program. And I think you'll see a lot more of Chase moving forward for sure.
That's awesome. And now it was hot. And now leading up to it, we were having you do heat consults for all the guys. Uh,
Yeah.
how did you guys handle it? And I think the bibs are ridiculous, Coach. Can you shed some light on this? Am I wrong? Is it a big deal to have that extra little piece because it doesn't ventilate very well?
Ooh, is it a big deal? Absolutely. And I want to take it out of motocross. Anybody who rides bicycles, anybody who runs, I want you to think about jumping on your bicycle, putting on your running shoes, and put your helmet, your goggles, your gloves, your jersey, your pants, completely asinine as that sounds, right? And just head out the door and start running, start cycling. Well, if I said to you, not only is that going to add heat, because there's no way for your body to wick away heat, you lose heat through your head and your feet, but you've got boots and a helmet on. You're on a 600 plus degree bike. You have 100% humidity and you have 100 degrees. Now you're going to add another layer to that. Like think about my professional runners and triathletes. We're trying to get the least amount of material between the skin itself and the ability to wick away sweat. We all respect that we race motorcycles. There's a lot of layers for sweat to go through. Why would you add another layer? Especially after last year, there were frustrations associated with the heat. The fact that we went to an outdoor national and they shortened the moto because of heat, and they didn't shorten the moto at an amateur race. The fact that you're putting bibs on there, the bibs aren't ventilated. Like, this is not my first motorcycle, Chris, was a 78 RM80, right? I remember the gear when my gosh, it didn't breathe at all. We didn't have technology of wick away back in 78. We do now. Why are we not running ventilated? Why are they not perforated? Why do they not breathe at all? Just take one of those bibs, hold it up to a fan, and watch how much air circulates through it. None.
It seems a little
scary.
bit ludicrous that these gear companies are spending tons of money developing these ventilated jerseys that keep dirt out and this high-tech fabric, and they throw what appears to me, and I haven't seen one or held one recently, but they're just this, I mean, it's thin, but it's like, really? You got all this high-tech stuff to keep cool and you throw that over it? It just, and I don't mind if it's under, like but when you get an excessive heat warning from the Weather Channel, you should let the guys take them off.
Well, and I don't want, like you said at the beginning, I think this is such an incredible race. I just think there's no other race that the bibs are required. Why at Loretta's? Like, Daytona is owned by MX Sports. Why is that? Why are bibs not run at Loretta's? They're not mandated at areas. They're not mandated at regionals. Then why at the national championship?
Because it's tradition. It's
I
tradition,
understand.
coach, and I love it. And it's something that you qualify for Loretta's, and they want every year when pitchers show up everywhere, they want you to know it was at Loretta's because you see the bib. And I get that. I do. But at the same time, at some point, common sense has to kick in. And every single person who's raced Loretta's, almost all of us, kept a bib, and it's one of our most prized trophies. And I get the tradition, but at some point, you got to put rider safety above that.
Well, let me play devil's advocate. If I'm an OEM, if I'm a gear company, and I'm giving an athlete 20 sets of gear during the year, if I've all year long I've been working with this athlete to make sure that they're comfortable and they get to Loretta's, and then you saw the one that jumps out is Fly, right? Fly, Fox. Every year they bring all their riders together, they do a big team picture, and then the first thing they do is put a bib over it, and you can't even see it. So again, I'm playing devil's advocate here. If I was a clothing company, I wouldn't be very happy that you're taking the most important race of the year. I've got photographers there. I'm going to be building marketing around it. And you can't even see my gear. Yeah, you can see the Fly gear. You can see the red. If the angle's from the side, you can see it. But the jersey, that beautiful jersey design that Fly put out there was cool. Fox, the Aiden Zing tribute, first class all the way, right? Once you put that bib on there, you can't see it. So I guess I struggle a little bit. Again, this goes back to sponsorship. I've got tremendous amount of background in sponsorship, activation, and all that goes with it. I would have a significant problem if I was a gear company and then I have to immediately cover it up with something. It's almost like, and again, we can go through any sport. Can you imagine let's say that you could get a super tight bib that could go over MotoGP. Would you be cool with that? Right? It's the most important race of the year, and all of a sudden, all the MotoGP riders have the same thing over their top. Go to Formula One. Every time they step out of the car, they all look exactly the same. I'm trying to rationalize it. Again, this isn't a dig on MX Sports. I'm just trying to rationalize if you're somebody who's into sponsor and activation, there's no way you could be happy with this. And yes, you get to put the little token, you can iron on your logo, but my goodness, Fly this big or Fly this big. I just don't understand, Coach.
I do have an affinity. I think it's kind of cool tradition wise, but at some point, you're right. You gotta go.
Hey, I'll give you the bib and then hang it up. Go put it in a shadow box on your wall.
That was my thing. Is give everybody a bib. Yeah. Let them run it if you want, and then you offer maybe it's cost on the bibs where they don't do event. Maybe if you pay a little extra, because people pay so much to go to that event, they're going to pay an extra $40 to get a vented bib. So offer a vented and a regular. I mean, there's got to be something they can do.
Well, but why should the athletes have to pay more for a vented when, if you're looking at, we're adding yet another layer that the wind's got to go through the bib, the jersey, the chest protector before it even hits our chest, which we're sitting here with the most vital organ right here in the top left part of your chest. Why would you, like you and I are two grown adults, why would we voluntarily add another layer Why would we want to not show our personal sponsors who've been with us all year long? And then I go to the most important race of the year, and all of that support essentially gets covered up. Makes no sense to me. From a sponsorship and activation, not an anti-MX sports. Just why do I want to overheat an athlete and make them wear something that covers my sponsors? I would have a problem with that.
Yeah, and a lot of them do, and they don't like it, and it does piss
Yeah.
them off. But there's this thing where you don't cross MX Sports or you get backlash. Slowly got it. I've gotten it. And that's the thing is even these gear companies, if you cross them and tell them not to put the bib on your rider and you start making a stink, all of a sudden your opportunities around this sport, because their tentacles go so far, they'll start messing with you. And that is the fear that everyone has, coach.
So somebody goes and dies of a heat stroke. You talked about Josh Lichtel, right? And his brothers reached out to me about it. He died of hyponatremia, hands down. So when you look at that, right, the idea that you're being told to drink water, drink water, drink water, you dilute the electrolytes, you could create a very dangerous condition of hyponatremia, you die. So when you're looking at the extreme opposite of that is heat stroke. So your skin stops sweating, you get chills, you get cotton mouth, you get, you start to get a headache, you start to feel your head's on fire, right? You're literally cooking your brains. You're in the middle of that through somewhere, depending on each individual, somewhere in there, you're going to get cramping. You've got all these self-defense mechanisms that'll try to slow you down until you can't go any further. So when you look at this, right, you've got heat on the motorcycle. I want to very quickly, Chris, because I talked to a lot of people this past week and they were surprised when I mentioned this. So for the sake of the listeners, I just want to share it with them. When you have a droplet of sweat on your skin, it will evaporate into the air as long as the humidity number is less than 100%. So if the air humidity is at 100%, that means that literally the air above your skin has 100% saturation of water. It can no longer absorb any more molecules of water. So when the skin tries to sweat and it gets met with a water molecule from above, you now have a heat blanket that increases the core body temperature because you can't wick away. The best analogy I could give for the sake of the listeners is imagine if you took your radiators and covered them in mud. You limit the ability for air to go over and get the circulation the way it's supposed to. So when you have 100% humidity in the air, the skin cannot wick away. Therefore, your core temperature goes up. You're on a motorcycle. You're going heart rate zone 3, high 3, low 4, 20 minutes. And then you're adding another layer. And then I mentioned it earlier, the cool zone. The last thing you ever want to do is take a human body from 70 degrees and then immediately expose it to 95 degrees. That's called thermal stress.
Well, okay, so I thought that was a good idea because I always have tried to stay cool before I race and keep my body temp down.
Mm-hmm.
But you're saying you can't be that cool, or like what if they did it at 85 degrees?
The big key is acclimatization. And I don't want to give away all of our secrets, but let's talk a little bit about, let's educate here a little bit. Let's go the other extreme. We're talking about cooling the body off before you go bring the heart rate up, right? Let's go the other extreme. You come off the track and I take that motorcycle and I can pull that engine out and I throw it in an ice bath. The thermal stress is going to crack the casings. That's thermal stress at a visual illustration. So when I'm sitting in a nice air-conditioned room, my body is like, okay, this is comfortable. Well, then I go out and it's a 20-degree slap in the face. That's thermal stress. Thermal stress creates excessive physical fatigue. Put that, kind of file that where it's at.
Well,
so what you want to do is you want to start your day and you want your body's natural core temperature to go up with the ambient air temperature. So the beautiful part at Loretta's, if you were fortunate enough to make 2 classes, you're pretty much racing one moto every day. So you just slowly bring the temperature up, you go race, then you slowly bring the temperature back down. You're trying to reduce fatigue associated with thermal stress.
What if I did an ice bath after my moto because I knew I was going to get some rest that night and I wanted to make my muscles feel better? Would that be
A plus? Yeah.
But I wouldn't want to do the ice bath if I had another moto that day because it would put too much stress. Is that right?
Yeah. I got ostracized because there was a summer when there was a high profile trainer that had the athletes jumping in an ice bath and their second motos were going to shit. And I just said, why are you thermal stressing an athlete with only 1 hour break in between motos? And the athletes were complaining that they were tired. And I kept saying it's because of the ice bath. And everybody said that I was just anti this trainer. I'm not anti anybody. I just want our listeners to know right from wrong and don't get duped into just because somebody's doing it means it makes sense, right? It's like I told you, if you hired me to be your mechanic for the week at Loretta's and I said, I've got this brilliant idea to lighten the bike. I'm going to run the oil at half. I'm going to run the radiator at half. You'd fire me immediately. Well, that's because it goes against the foundation of physics and mechanical. Well, if I say to you that thermal stress is going to fatigue a human being and you come off of, I know it feels good when you're, so freaking hot after a moto, jumping into something cold feels good, but you got to understand what happens when you drive your car off of a road into a frozen lake. Do the first responders just take their time? Because what happens is when you fall into a body of water that's frozen, your body will immediately start to shiver to create heat to try to warm up that body of water. Well, obviously you lose because of the volume of water. Well, when you jump into an ice bath, you're losing energy to that ice bath and you're going to go get warmed up again and then go do another moto. You've already excessively fatigued yourself. So
Wow.
now go the opposite direction, right? Your athletes are sitting in there. They're nice and comfortable. They walk out, they get hit with that 30-degree difference. Humidity's at 100%. That's thermal stress. And the athletes were calling me complaining. Why, not the athletes, their parents. Why is my athlete? I said, were they in the cooling zone? Oh, yeah. I said, don't let them go back in there. Every parent called me after the second moto. Holy shit, what a difference. And I'm like, I didn't create physiology, but I have to teach you what it's telling you,
So you wouldn't, so okay, so like when you go to the line, sometimes it can be like an hour, hour and a half. You never know the delay.
Mm-hmm.
What if I go to the cooling zone until 30 minutes before? Would I be all right then? Is that slow enough time to bring it back up?
Nope. You need as much time. Like we always start back at the rig, right? And you go to that, especially for first motos where you have to be there 2 races before. You stay in the shade, you have air blowing on you, and you just try to keep your core body temperature. Because as soon as it's like heart rate, if you go from 85 to 185 in the first lap, the lactic acid dump is just going to shut the whole body down. That's why a warm up. Why does Tour de France? Why do they warm up for an hour and a half to 2 hours to do a 10-mile time trial? Why does Usain Bolt warm up for an hour to run 8 seconds? But our sport argues and says, "Oh, that's stupid. We don't warm up. We don't warm up." I'm like, really? Show me one other sport that does not warm up. You won't find one. Not one. But and I don't want that to sound condescending. That's why I love the subscribers and the listeners that you have. We're only here trying to give you the knowledge so you don't make the same mistake. If you wouldn't hire me as a mechanic because I want to lighten your bike by cutting your oil in half, and you say to me, well, you're an idiot. That bike's going to run hot. Why? Because it's the law of physics. It's mechanical. Okay, well, then don't argue with the physiological of throwing yourself into a cold environment, smashing it and exposing it to heat, and then taking the heart rate up into zone 3, low 4, and wonder why the body gets tired quickly. It's thermal stress. If you've ever gone to a football game and you've sat out shivering and you get back inside, how tired are you?
Exhausted.
And it's now, again, we're not talking about you're sitting in the cold area shivering, but it's thermal stress. It's a lot more visible when you've been out there shivering. You finally get inside and you finally thaw out a little bit. You're freaking exhausted. It's not like you've been at the football game running for 4 hours. You're at the football game shivering for 4 hours.
Yeah.
So that's why I just want the listeners to really understand. Again, it was a very, very cool gesture by Monster and Cowie to have that available, but that would be more, I think, of a more appropriate area. They called it the lounge area. That should be a lounge area when someone's done for the day. They have food in there. That would be something. And I know it's not possible for MX Sports to do that for the whole damn race. That's not what I'm insinuating. That would be enormous. I mean, you could have a freaking football field size and you'd still not have enough room for everybody. There's a lot of racers there.
Yes,
it's a great race all the way around.
Well, Coach, I know you're in France right now, and it's in the middle of the night, and I don't want to keep you up any longer.
No, I appreciate it, buddy. I appreciate you giving me a chance to follow back up with everybody because I got a lot of questions, a lot of positive a lot of positive DMs from the preview show. So I appreciate this opportunity to follow up. Yeah,
awesome. Anything else that you maybe forgot of that you want to talk about?
Not that I can think of right now. Like you say, it is going on 2 a.m. here in France, and my wife and I, we went into Paris for the day, and then we went to Moulin Rouge. Some of the guys may bust my balls for this, but I do love musicals. And like we just took our daughter last month to New York City to go see Moulin Rouge on Broadway. And Boy George was actually the main character in it. And so we had front row seats to that. And after seeing the story and everything, I know, again, the guys are going to bust my balls, but I wanted to come back to France, and there's an area that's literally above where Moulin Rouge is based out of. And that whole area, the gentleman who built that brought the entertainers and the artists into that area. And that's what we spent yesterday doing, was going through all the different artistic areas. And then today we went and spent the day in Paris, and then we had dinner, and then we actually had dinner at Moulin Rouge. And then we're about 90 minutes outside of Paris. So we got an Uber back, and you were kind enough to move it back another hour. So I really appreciate it. But we're here in Paris for another week of some closed door business meetings. Talk a little bit more about it, maybe on another show. And then we actually head to Italy for 2.5 weeks after this. We've got some possible new facility contracts that we're going to be inking, a couple partnership deals. So we're excited to be over here, but we'll be back in the country at the beginning of September.
Very cool, Coach.
Good
Hey,
stuff.
travel safe, and thank you so much for your time, my friend.
Appreciate it. Thanks for all the subscribers. Cooksy Mob, let's go.
Let's start this off by saying, we got them. The illegal sale of American motorcycle racing. I present a case that reveals how the American Motorcyclist Association's 2008 sale of its racing properties constituted an illegal transfer of public trust into private hands. My name's B Mazy, and I'm here to stir shit up. So I made a song for you guys. You know, it's crazy that the riders still gotta pay to race, even though these guys are just filling their pockets because they're money hungry, greedy, stupid mother ex-circus owners, but still got the same mindset for the Supercross. Screw Feld, screw the AMA, and screw Robb Dingman.